Good day. This is Terry Difazio, and you're watching Dial It Up. Today our guest is Mr. John Klar. John and his wife Jacqui have started a new church in Westfield, and they are working on a special mission at the moment. John, can you tell me about this special mission and about your church even?
Well, that's a good question, Terry, because they're actually very much connected.
Excellent.
We've been at the same church for about 11 years now in Irisburg. And about a year ago, I was approached by a pastor in Uganda who I figured out by talking to other people who'd been over there was a very sincere and bona fide pastor in Uganda, and he works with a bunch of children there. And so he asked me if I would help him start a school for the children. And so through our church in Irisburg, we started doing fundraising, and like many churches, that church has its own overheads, and so we could only get so much support there. So I started looking more and more outside of the church, particularly to family and friends and professional relationships around different parts of the country, and I cobbled together enough money that we were able to send it over to them, and they started the school. Well, over time we then found that perhaps we should go outside of the church and do a special fundraising event, like a bingo, or we wanted to do a musical event. And as we started to look to rent like a memorial building or the municipal building in Orleans or something like that, we thought, well, maybe we should do this in a church context and have a Christian message. We are supporting a pastor who has children in school, and they are Christians, so it seemed appropriate. So one thing led to another, and we actually ended up finding disused churches, and we thought that would be a better forum.
Oh, okay.
And we started out actually at the St. John of the Cross Church on the Creek Road in Albany, and we undertook to restore services there in that church in cooperation with the Catholic Diocese. And Father,
okay.
I don't know if you'd heard this story, but so...
Yes, I have, but please tell us.
Yeah,
tell our audience about it.
This is how we got to Westfield. It's kind of a convoluted tale. And so for about a month, starting just before Easter, we were giving services every Sunday there, and our hope was to rent that building, which hadn't been used for regular worship services in about 20 years.
And this was the Catholic church?
This was the Catholic church.
Not the one in Westfield?
Not the one in Westfield.
Oh, okay.
At this point, Westfield's not even being thought about, wasn't on the radar. And after a few weeks, though, the bishop announced that they would not approve, for whatever reasons, the leasing of the building to us, and would prefer that the diocese just either sold the building or restored it to full Catholic services. And we were hoping to use it in partnership, and we would do Protestant services on Sundays and then allow Father Naples with the Trinity Parish in Barton to do Sunday services once a month. That was the plan. So when that fell through, we actually had quite a few people coming, and we thought, well, we should keep this going. We need sustained giving for Uganda. Everything we raised was going right to Uganda. It was either going to go to Uganda to buy school books. We now have over we have at this point now, at that point, and still, we have nearly 300 children enrolled in the school in Uganda.
Oh.
Pastor Simon Peter, who is disabled and works from a wheelchair of sorts that he has hand-powered pedals with, and he powers around, and he conducts worships at 4 churches while overseeing the school every day.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
The school costs about $150 a month to rent. We have school books. We could use some more desks. We have teachers that are there. They work for $110 a month. They're there every morning at 7:30 in the morning until 5:30 at night. We have videos and pictures that we've posted on our Facebook page, which is called Children in Need Uganda.
Mm-hmm.
So in an effort to keep it going, long story short, we looked at a couple of other churches, and we went and met with the people that were sort of the caretakers of the Westfield Church, the first congregational church in Westfield, which had not been used for a number of years at all. Beautiful building. And we met with them, we proposed to them, well, how about we restore worship services at this church? And they seemed intrigued at the idea that they could bring some people back in on Sundays. So we started doing that. And we've had 3 weeks now. We've only been there about 3 weeks. But we started our first Bible study last night. We had 10 people there. Saturday we did Lamb Day, our first Lamb Day, and we brought a bunch of lambs over there and we put them in the front yard and fenced it in, and we must have had 40 or 50 children come from the community.
Oh,
so
really?
We're still, and that's part of why it's kind of you to have us on, we're trying to get the word out that the church is back in Westfield and that we're doing good things there.
I think I drove by that on my way to Burlington this past weekend. Is it right before the hardware store?
It is on the left if you're
Right.
going that way. Yeah,
I made note of it this time. So you were able to tie in your church work with this special mission, correct?
Yes, the two, what we've done now is we're doing the orphanage, or the school, I should say, because they're not all technically orphans, though many of the children are. Their parents are deceased. We're doing it as sort of a side mission for the church in Westfield. The money we're raising now for our contributions at Westfield is to be used to restore that church. It needs a new roof. It needs some other work. That church was built in 1907. It's got tin ceilings and tin walls. Much of it's very original. It's historic because of its preservation. So many older churches have had a lot of modernizations over the years. This church is really, in many ways, very close to its original construction. It's a beautiful little church. The church has actually been there, the congregation, since 1818. But this church building was constructed in 1907. So we're trying to renovate the building, revive worship there regularly, contribute to the community. The people have been so welcoming. I can't say how encouraging it's been and how exciting to have people be so excited about a church. You know, it's a real gift to be able to do this.
Well, it's good that you found a place. Since the last I had known before you moving into this church was that you were working out something with the Catholic Church. And I didn't realize until recently that it had fallen through. Now, what denomination is your church, and what denomination was that church before you came, when they had services there?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what their denomination was there. I think it may have changed over the years. By studying the history, they've had a number of pastors over the years. Right? And so I don't know whether there's a formal statement of faith for them. We are non-denominational Protestant. We're Bible-based. We don't ascribe to any particular theological view in the form of an established religious group, but
like a Congregationalist or a Unitarian? Or?
We're definitely not Unitarian.
No.
We're more scripturally based, more congregational in our structure. We're still evolving as far as what that is. Within certain parameters, we want to be responsive to people. What do people in the community want to do for activities? Do they want to have a children's church? If they want to do a Bible study, what would you like to do the Bible study about? And as we form our church structure and have a more formal statement of faith, we hopefully, as a body, will come together and determine those things. But part of the ministry that I have felt called to undertake here, it's very community-based, but I find that Christian churches are in conflict just too much. So particularly trying to bridge the divide between Protestants and Catholics has been an intriguing and at times amusing venture in its own right. That's been going on for a few years, hasn't it? It's been going on for hundreds of years.
Yeah, a few centuries.
And so I'm a Protestant. I intend to remain a Protestant. I have breakfast just about every week with Father Naples, and we talk about our mutual efforts, and we try to bolster and pick each other's spirits up to continue in our work.
So you're trying to find a common ground?
Well, I think there is a common ground.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and I think that for too long people are quick to focus negatively on attributes or aspects of other people's faith that really don't need to be focused on. Now, having said that, it's not that doctrine isn't important. Evelyn Waugh, the novelist, was not a Christian. He actually was quite a millionaire playboy, and after a number of years of a hedonistic lifestyle, he converted to Catholicism. And he wrote in the London Times in 1922, he said, "Much will be made of my conversion to Catholicism," he said, "but the great battle in the universe is not between Catholics and Protestants, it's between Christianity and chaos." that's what we need to unite ourselves in and have more amicable work together to help the poor, to help our communities, to help each other. Historically, in New England particularly, the minister served a lot of functions that have now been taken away from church bodies, for better or for worse. People have different views, but the minister might have been, in a way, the peace officer, if there wasn't a local cop. The minister would have been the psychiatrist and the psychologist and the mediator and the marriage counselor, perhaps the lawyer, if there wasn't a lawyer in town. The minister would serve, not formally necessary, but the minister served as a hub in New England communities, of a sort of a glue to reconcile and keep the community whole and keep it healing and keep it moving well, not without imperfections. But that need, and why I think that Westfield is exciting, because it doesn't have another church and hasn't for a number of years, that role can still be filled by a church. A church can bring people together, and we live in a society where studies show that people are more alienated than ever before. People in suburban parts of America live next door to people they've lived together for years, 20 feet away, and they don't even know each other. Yeah. The more we get population dense, the more we get techno-dependent and push buttons, the more alienating people are being.
Well, we lose our ability to socialize. Because you're hiding behind a screen, correct?
And that hurts people.
Yeah.
Because we are social beings, and we need other people. And this is a society where, especially with all the technological advances, it's very easy to be connected and alone, if you understand what I'm saying.
Oh, definitely. I agree 100%, John.
Recently, we had a person that we learned of. I didn't know them personally, and they were 38 years old and took their own life. And from what I understand, for a period of months before that, he had just started to withdraw from people. People didn't see it coming. He was able to just withdraw. And I think that a good church is pastoral. That idea of pastoral is the sense that the pastor cares about what people are doing during the week. It's not just a Sunday message. It's going out to visit them, and if they're in the hospital, to go talk to them and just have some compassion. Humans do really well with compassion. You know, that's something I've learned over the years. As you know, I've worked in a lot of different areas, and it's rewarding. And life isn't just about money. So that's why some of us are drawn into church work, but also why church work is really important. And I think it's going to and is gaining a greater legitimacy, a greater relevance in our society today. I think people are more and more being drawn, like Lamb Day, to community events that don't cost money, that aren't just commercial ventures, that are about spaghetti dinners or apple pie festivals or an ice cream festival or a Bible study, where people come together solely to learn more about God's Word, but to have fellowship where they can ask the questions that they don't ask at other times, to have that whole community rapport that we're losing. And Vermont is one of the beautiful places where we can still maintain and still nurture those kinds of connections that we often take for granted. But if they're not tended, the weeds will come in, and we'll lose those foundations of community. So I believe that church is very much a part of that.
How long was this church empty until you got there?
My understanding is it's been empty for 8 years as far as regular services. They have periodically done some musical events and some annual holiday events, I believe. But
do you have a capacity? Does the church have a capacity? Does it hold? How many people will it hold?
I haven't calculated, but I think it would probably hold over 100, especially with the upstairs. Yeah, it's beautiful. The woodwork and everything is in beautiful condition.
I am definitely going to have to check this out. Not only that, but I know that you're in need of a sound system, and I am in the process of trying to help you with that.
Well, we're grateful.
But so it's been empty for 8 years, huh?
That's my understanding, and from reading the church history, it always had services up until then, from 1818 until 8 years ago. So it seemed a real shame, and I think that that's maybe why a lot of people are intrigued and excited. They had maybe taken it for granted. Churches need to be more than just a building that we preserve historically. Otherwise, like old barns, they look pretty, but they'll fall down.
Oh, definitely.
And you need the money and the resources, and worship will do that, but also, maybe I shouldn't use the analogy, but old barns, the people will tell you the best way to keep a barn in good condition is to keep animals in it. And the best way to keep a church going is to keep people in it.
Yes.
And that's about service. That's about community and service.
Well, one of the basic laws of physics states that which is not maintained will fall apart. It will deteriorate. You have to do that with your house. You have to do that with your car. And a church, I don't think, would be any different, do you?
I don't. I think it's very much the case. And so we're trying to bring some energy back in and some maintenance and some attention to hopefully have that be contagious. And so far, I think it is. I think people have said, this is more than we might have imagined doing, but great, let's try it. And it's working. And we've had a really wonderfully positive response so far.
So do you know who was, what group was the last group in this church before it became abandoned for 8 years? Do you know who it was that was in there?
As far as, well, there are individuals who have been sort of the caretakers for the church.
Oh, okay.
And that's who we met with. We collected the remnant of community members that had been overseeing the church since they stopped worshiping there. And my understanding is that they just weren't getting very many people in attendance. I don't know what that story is, whether it was the quality of the message or people moving on with busy lives. But again, I'm hopeful that people that might not have otherwise gone might start going now, because they are appreciating how important a focal point of church is for that community. It's a beautiful little agrarian farming community too. So for me personally, being a farmer, it's perfect. It's my kind of people, as they would say. So.
Yeah, and it's probably the only church around for several miles, isn't it?
It is, yes. There is another church in Lowell, south on 100, Dave Difazio's church.
Oh yeah, I know about that one. I've never seen it, but I've heard about that one. Yeah.
And they've been very supportive, and we hope to do some things in unity with them, some community events, maybe share in vacation, summer school, or some kind of activities with the kids that we can have. We're battering around some ideas and looking for community feedback about maybe some hiking trips, some farming outreach. We'd like to take kids out to visit farms, and kind of keeping with the Lamb Day. Lamb Day, kids are drawn to a lamb, and children need to know where their food comes from. And one of the things I post on the Facebook page is that all children are aged 1 to 101 were invited to Lamb Day. You're never too old to hold a lamb.
That's true.
Of course, that's the symbol in the Bible of Jesus too, so it made for a good message on Sunday.
Well, it was good that you were able to draw that, put the nexus of that together, be able to show that it was Bible-based, plus it has a human connection,
Well, and it gave a lot of the adults, the parents, while the kids were playing with the lambs, and we had popcorn and lemonade and things like that, well, they had an opportunity to come in and look in the church. And many of them had lived in the town for decades and never been inside that church, either because they weren't church-going, or some people had been there for a number of years and it hasn't been open. And all agreed it's a beautiful, historically well-preserved building. So everything seems lined up really well to continue to thrive there, and we're excited to have the opportunity. It's a real honor to be in such a tradition and to try to give it some rejuvenation and bring some new energy and ideas into it. So we're optimistic, and we're going to press on.
How many parishioners do you have currently, approximately?
We had, week before last, we had about 25. This past week we had fewer than that. 10 in a first week Bible study with short notice, I thought was pretty good. Yeah. We were pretty excited about that. So, and that's Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock at the church. We're doing a study on the book of Ephesians. We're literally doing a Bible study that is a study of the texts of that book. It's a short book, very highly packed with doctrine and great, beautiful language and great ideas to make our lives better in a small way.
What are some of the bigger challenges you've faced so far, either with the church or with the mission?
Well, the mission, the problem has been sustained giving. It's about $2,000 a month to keep the church, to keep the school open. We have almost 300 children in that school, though. So that's a big continuing demand, and I'm constantly trying to balance that with other things. This church in Westfield isn't likely to become a resource of its own to support that kind of a venture. I've approached other institutions, and the demand and the need is just huge in Uganda. So it's very hard to get larger outfits like Samaritan's Purse or World Vision or Save the Children or Compassion International. They all are just inundated with demand. So we've been sort of an island, and so that's been the biggest challenge. I just spoke with Pastor Simon Peter last night by Skype, and this is the first month where we've fallen short for our payroll needs. So I continue to do work outside of the church. I do some work. I do volunteer mediation and legal type work in exchange for the understanding that if it's successful, that the money will be donated to the school. If these kids didn't go to this school, they might be able to go to a mosque up the road. There are mosques there.
In Westfield?
In Uganda.
Oh, Uganda,
in the
okay.
School, yep.
I got to shift gears
Yeah,
here.
no mosques in Westfield that I'm aware of yet, though they're welcome. It's a free country.
Yeah, absolutely.
But many of the kids in Uganda wouldn't have a school otherwise. They're getting fed a meal twice a day. They get porridge for breakfast and they get bean soup for lunch, which for them is a feast. It's transforming the community. It's a stunning success there, and it costs us less than $10 a month for a child to get 2 meals a day and 5 days a week of school. And they're learning to read and they're learning to write. And so I wasn't suggesting to be negative towards Islam, but to be positive about Christianity. If we are to act on our own faith, then we should be there to help people in those parts of the world.
Well, I think that's important, John, because so many people don't concentrate on they'll tell you what they can't do, but they won't tell you what they can do. And I think what you just said is extremely important, because it's not about being at war. We have this mentality. There's always got to be a conflict. There's always an adversarial relationship, as opposed to what you just said, which is how can we work with this, rather than, be at war with somebody. How can we get our message across, which is probably not that much different if you really look at the basics of it. If they're trying to do a certain good and you're trying to do a certain good, it goes back to what you said about finding a common ground, correct? It
does, and in fact, I'll expand on that a bit. I smile a bit because that's a great comment. We are in conflict. We are at war. If we are to believe in, most religions see it this way, but certainly in our Christian faith, then we're in a spiritual battle which is greater than the physical one of fighting against age and illness and our material needs. We can observe this around us. We can see this spiritual battle in ourselves, days when I could do good things or bad things, and I'm in a battle all the time, that little angel and that little devil. We are moral beings. C.S. Lewis, T.S. Eliot, many great writers. It's observable. It's inescapable. So clearly within our community, one thing I tried to do here in Newport a couple years ago was to help organize the local churches to start a homeless shelter here. Do I confine myself to just helping white kids in Vermont, or do I help black kids in Africa? Jesus said, help people where you find them. And
exactly.
But on the reason I smiled is I think the Catholics and the Protestants can learn a lot from each other instead of focusing on their division and their conflict. And the Catholics have a very long and strong tradition of doing things for the poor, of having community events. The Catholics have a very good tradition there. They aren't, in my experience, a lot of times certainly what would be called the Catholic laity as opposed to the priests. They're not always as steeped in the Word. They're not always reading Scripture. And the Protestants, on the other hand, are very, very good about studying their Bibles, but they're also often very insular. If you listen to a lot of the Protestants, some of the great speakers I listen to on the radio, they're wonderful, but it's always what Alistair Begg, one of the speakers, calls using Jesus as your personal guru. How can Jesus make me happier, make my marriage better, my relationship better, me, 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 me? And that is an important component. It's what I call the micro versus the macro. The macro is, what does Jesus tell me to do? True religion is this, to help widows and orphans and those in need. Where we find them. Can we help them all? No. Should we therefore ignore them all? Heaven forbid. So the Protestants and Catholics together, if we each complemented ourselves in our own walk by the best of each tradition, that would mean Protestants doing more and Catholics learning more. And I think we can each benefit from the other's tradition and learning how to do that better. And in that unity of doing things together, we're serving Christ better. We're complementary. We're not, we don't need to argue over the sometimes less important doctrines that, people say, well, that's very important. Well, it is, but I don't need to embrace certain Catholic doctrines in order to agree that we have a God and a Savior and a duty to help the poor. I don't need to get into any of those divisions whatsoever. We can have nice chats over a cup of tea about that. I think that's important too, John, because too many people get hung up on the differences rather than the similarities. But you led me to another good question, but I meant to ask you, now Uganda's been stricken with a lot of civil war. Is that true? Historically, yes, but it's one of the more stable African.
Okay, so it is more stable now than when it was.
Yes, it's and has been for a number of years. There's still some level of graft and corruption there, but that's why we wire the money directly to Simon Peter. We're fully transparent. All the money goes through the churches. I don't handle the money personally. It's 501c3 deductible for that reason, because it goes through the church accounts. It goes right to him directly in his church, and the proof is in the pudding. The videos and the photos are there. The money is being, he gives me an accounting and he shows where he's spending the money. The rent's $150 a week for the whole school, or I beg your pardon, a month. They painted the building, they have a lot of community support, they erected fences, they built latrine, the huge latrine, it's 23 feet deep. They dug it barefoot, we got pictures of it. People there are really quite poor, but that's why a little does a lot. And a lot of philanthropic organizations spend a large percentage of their money on overheads, on staff, on advertising, on fundraising, and the actual money that filters through to those in need can at times be stunningly small. We have pretty much 100% of the money that we raise goes right there. Just the only overhead is the wire transfer fund. Everything goes right to Simon Peter, and therefore every penny goes into that school and into those children's lives. And that's, and in time, as people come to trust that name, Children in Need Uganda, and trust that it has, that when they donate their money, it's actually going to go completely to those that they intend it for. That's important. We've had a lot of abuse in our country recently. Wounded warriors
definitely.
and others. We've had some horribly high-profile cases of abuse, and that hurts all charities, because people, when they want to give, they don't want to give to have it thrown away. They don't want to be deceived. They don't want to be robbed.
And isn't there a law that states that if you don't give 50 or 51% of what you take in other words, you can't tie it all up in administration? I remember way back many years ago, there was one organization that essentially 80 cents out of every dollar supported their bureaucracy.
There are a lot of organizations, sadly, that do that.
Okay.
But I don't know that there's a law. There could be a law that at some point impacts their 501c3 status, but I don't think it's illegal. And we have free speech rights that pertain to corporations too under Citizens United. So
yes.
there are a lot of charities out there if you look, and then it's a matter of accounting and how they allocate the funds. They can make stuff look like it's going to the intended purpose, but it's just another layer of administration expense.
Citizens United is something we could talk about for hours, and we won't today.
Well, maybe another show, but
that's very possible.
But, and I was smiling about it, but I mean, we do recognize the freedom of corporations to operate and give a small percentage of their funds to the stated cause. That's happened for a long time. So I don't think there's a blanket prohibition, but I don't know the law on charitable organizations that well. I just know that everything we raise goes through our church accounts and goes directly to Pastor Simon. And at some point, if we had more people that could go over to visit, he's actually a Grace Brethren congregation and Grace Brethren Churches International. And so that in itself was crossing the divide, so to speak. We're at that time, we were non-denominational Protestant. They're denominational Protestant. We've got Catholic churches donating money to a Grace Brethren denomination through it. This is walking the walk. We're coming together to help the children where they are, rather than confuse them. Well, what do you mean I can't eat today because you guys don't agree on whether somebody should be dunked 3 times at baptism or not? I mean, these are the things that often fragment people from action. So we're trying to transcend those things.
How have you been received in Westfield so far, John?
100% positively.
Good.
And we've bounced around that. There were some people in Albany when we were at the St. John of the Cross Church that said, what are you doing there? That's a Catholic church. Or both Protestants and Catholics. That was a bit of an unusual animal. So this doesn't have any of that kind of controversy. I think also Westfield is just a really warm community. I've thought so over the years when I've had occasion to visit there, and the more I spend time there. We've gone to the senior center, we've gone to different businesses in the area and just introduced ourselves, and people are just, they're vibrant and they're excited and they love their town. It's really, to me, and this is just my own personal observation, but I grew up in Vermont in the 60s and 70s in small Vermont towns, and a lot of the glue that held our communities together has been lost. A lot of the farming has been lost, a lot of the small farms, and those patriarchs, those forces have diminished. So as much as I love the kingdom, because I think that we in the kingdom in general have retained more of those connections, Westfield seems to be even maybe more sheltered, sort of like the land of the lost. You know, it's sort of like stepping into a, and you've got all the traffic coming through there for Jay and everything else. It's you know, modern in that sense, but the community seems to have preserved a lot more of that close-knit interdependence that I think is just wonderful to still have for our children, and so I like to contribute to it. It's something I love about raising my kids here in the kingdom, is that we know each other.
We have to wrap up right now, John, but what I want to ask, first of all, is there any contact information for people that want to support your mission? Is there a website, a phone number, an email, anything like that?
Sure. There's people can call me personally, 673-4852, if they have any questions. On Facebook, we have 2 pages set up. One is called Children in Need Uganda. Just you can type in Children in Need Uganda, and it'll take you to videos and pictures that we keep updating to let people know what's happening there at the school with the money they contribute. And we have a website called First Congregational Church of Westfield, which has pictures of events in the church, and there are a couple pictures there, I think, of Lamb Day, and we hope to get some more. And so a way to interact and let people see what we're doing and communicate with people. And those are the 2 chief ways. And if people wish to make contributions to Children in Need Uganda, they can do through that site. Has some information, but we make checks payable to New Hope Bible Church, which is the church that we're still in partnership with in Irisburg, and it goes through their account and is wired to Simon Peter. So it's 100% tax deductible under their 501c3 charity.
John, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have to do this. We'll probably find another of many subjects, and it's good to have you on.
Well, thank you, Terry. I appreciate it.
This is Terry Difazio for Dial It Up saying we'll catch you on the flip side. Have a good one.